joining us on the line to discuss the reopening of land claims is Advocate Bheki Mbili, who is the head of Restitution at the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform. Advocate, thank you so much for making the time to join us on the line. Just remind us once again, why is this process being reopened?
It's been reopened because there are people who made representations to the department and indicated that when the first phase was opened, the message or our communication strategy did not enable us to reach every corner of the Republic. And as a result, they did not hear about the process. And that's one part why the process was reopened. But there are also communities which, when they lodged their claims, they left out certain properties which they were dispossessed of. And when all of those things were considered, a decision was then taken that the process should be reopened. Of course, after extensive consultation with the stakeholders who've got something to do with issues relating to land. And that's why the process was reopened.
Advocate, I clearly understand your point on perhaps not the most optimal communication, but help us understand why why applicants would leave out some of the properties that they feel rightfully belong to them.
Well, remember, it was a new program. There's never been restitution in the country before the advent of democracy. So the process involved the completion of claim forms. And because we were not learning from any best practices from our country or from the program as we would have implemented it before, there were mistakes that were made in the completion of claim forms by claimant communities. And that's how it happened that certain properties were left out. And remember, some of the places that they were dispossessed of, they knew them by their traditional names, not by the names of what is contained in your registrar of deeds or in the deeds registry. So that's how it happened. And there was also a court decision which then said that properties that were not included in the claim form, the Commission on Restitution of Land Rights could not process those properties unless claimant communities had claimed those properties. So that's how it happened that certain properties were left out. And the other issue that I may just mention is that in terms of historical information on dispossession, a significant number of communities were dispossessed. But when you look at the number of claims that were lodged, there was a huge discrepancy, which confirms the point that communities made that, look, some of us did not even hear about the process, and that's why we did not lodge land claims.
Advocate, how do you then reassure a number of South African farmers who are unsettled by the reopening of this process?
Well, restitution is not here to be a threat to socio-economic development or to farming activities. In the same way that we've tried to ensure that we protect productivity on the land, that's what we will do when we process land claims in terms of the new process. We are the first ones to admit that in the implementation of the program, in terms of the first phase, there are lessons that we learned and there are things that we are going to do differently to make sure that the agitation on the part of some of the farmers is dealt with and everyone is settled that the program is not here to threaten the economic activity and of employment opportunities in the country.
Advocate, before we let you go, I understand we have a bit of a poor line there, but perhaps you can confirm whether the stories that we've been reading in the media that President Zuma's nephew has lodged a claim for 60 farms in the Mbili area in KZN is true or not. Is the president's nephew out to get 60 farms under his name?
Well, I cannot speak on behalf of the president's nephew. But speaking from the report that I saw yesterday in the newspapers that I read, there's nothing in the report that says they have or the nephew has lodged a land claim. What I saw in the report is that they are doing their research to determine the extent of dispossession so as to prevent the thing that I spoke to you about earlier on, where communities would claim certain properties and leave out certain properties. In the report that I read, there is the stage that they are at, conducting their research to determine the extent of the land that they were dispossessed of. And it is only after they've completed that exercise that I assume they will then consider lodging a land claim. But as things stand, in terms of the new process, there's no land claim that has been lodged, at least from the information that I saw in the newspapers yesterday.
Okay, Advocate, final question before I let you go. Just remind us again the criteria that the applicants have to meet. We're trying to ascertain amongst ourselves as well whether Mr. Zuma Jr., if I may refer to him as that, would qualify as an applicant if and when they decide to lodge it.
Well, you can't determine that until such time that a claim has been lodged. But if you read the Restitution of Land Rights Act, it says that people that were dispossessed of their land rights and the instruments that were used to dispossess them of their land rights, it was racial laws that prevailed in the country from the period 19 June 1913 coming this way, or discriminatory practices. They can lodge land claims claiming those rights that they were dispossessed of. It's persons, it's communities, and it's descendants of people that are dispossessed of their rights that are able to lodge land claims. But you can't determine whether a person's claim is valid or not until such time that you've done research on the validity of the land claim.
Advocate, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. That was Advocate Bheki Mbili. He's the head of restitution at the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform.